There are films created to entertain, others to inspire. But there are also films that carve themselves so deeply into human culture that they become legends. The Wizard of Oz is one of them. On screen, it is a dazzling world filled with vibrant colors, music, and wonder. Yet behind the velvet curtain lies a story filled with danger, tension, and disasters that came frighteningly close to reality. Every step taken in the famous ruby slippers was surrounded by chaos. Below are 20 shocking facts you may have never heard about the making of this masterpiece. 1. Judy Garland, the substitute who paid a cruel price. When we think of Dorothy Gale, the image that instantly comes to mind is Judy Garland, with her large, sorrowful eyes and the iconic blue gingham dress. But few people realize that the executives at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer initially had a completely different actress in mind for the role, the world's most famous child star at the time, Shirley Temple. However, fate intervened when Shirley Temple was unable to meet the demanding vocal requirements needed to deliver the emotional weight of the film's legendary song, Over the Rainbow. In the end, Judy Garland was cast, despite the fact that she was already 16 years old, far older than Dorothy, who was only 8 years old in the original story. To maintain the illusion of childlike innocence, MGM imposed an extremely harsh regimen on her. She was forced to follow strict dieting rules, encouraged to smoke cigarettes to suppress her appetite, and most painfully, required to tightly bind her chest to hide her developing figure. These cruel sacrifices, combined with Garland's extraordinary natural voice, ultimately created a version of Dorothy that was deeply emotional and heartbreakingly authentic, so powerful that it became an irreplaceable icon in the history of cinema. 2. The film was born from rivalry with Disney's Empire. The creation of The Wizard of Oz was not purely driven by artistic passion. In reality, it was partly a strategic act of retaliation. In 1937, when Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs by Walt Disney became a global phenomenon, MGM found itself in a state of near panic. The studio feared losing its dominance in Hollywood and desperately wanted a fantastical empire of its own to rival Disney's success. Frank Baum's beloved novel suddenly became the perfect weapon to realize that ambition. MGM poured an enormous budget into the project, hoping to transform it into a cinematic gold mine capable of standing toe-to-toe with Disney. But reality proved harsher than expected. Due to the massive production and marketing costs, the film actually suffered financial losses during its initial theatrical release. It took decades and countless television broadcasts for the movie to finally achieve the legendary cultural status it holds today. In doing so, it proved that the true value of art sometimes requires time to rise above the commercial calculations that surround its birth. 3. The Wizard of Oz, from practical decision to a multi-role masterpiece. Few people realize that the mysterious and powerful figure behind the curtain almost had a completely different personality if MGM had agreed to the demands of comedian W.C. Fields. As a major star of the era, Fields demanded a salary of $75,000, an astronomical figure in 1939. Faced with his uncompromising stance, the studio ultimately decided to walk away from negotiations and instead cast Frank Morgan, a choice that not only saved money but unexpectedly added artistic depth to the film. This decision led to one of the most clever details in cinematic history. Frank Morgan did not simply play the wizard. He portrayed 5 different characters throughout the film, including Professor Marvel, the gatekeeper, and the carriage driver. Seeing the same face appear repeatedly in different disguises subtly reinforced one of the film's central themes. Although the land of Oz dazzles with color and magic, it is also filled with illusions and deceptive appearances. Morgan's versatility transformed what could have been a minor role into a key that helps unlock the deeper truth behind this fantastical world. 4. The Wicked Witch of the West, from enchanting sorceress to a green nightmare. In the earliest concept sketches, the filmmakers originally envisioned the Wicked Witch of the West as a mysterious and alluring sorceress, someone elegant, seductive, and somewhat glamorous, similar to the image of the evil queen in Disney films. However, after many discussions, the creative team made a dramatic reversal. They ultimately concluded that pure evil needed a terrifying and grotesque appearance in order to create a truly haunting impression for young audiences. And so Margaret Hamilton was cast. With her naturally angular facial features and her uncanny ability to manipulate her voice into something sharp and chilling, Hamilton brought to life a green-skinned creature with a long nose and an unforgettable presence. In real life, Margaret was known as an incredibly gentle and kind woman. Yet on screen, she delivered a performance so powerful that the Wicked Witch of the West became one of the most iconic and frightening villains in cinematic history. This transformation did more than intensify the drama of The Wizard of Oz. It also established a visual standard for the image of the witch in popular culture, one that has endured for nearly a century. 5. The Ruby Slippers, a transformation thanks to the magic of Technicolor. In the original novel written by L. Frank Baum, the magical shoes that carried Dorothy home were silver, not red. But when the story was adapted for the big screen, the filmmakers realized that silver would appear dull and unimpressive against the dazzling yellow brick road, especially when filmed using the cutting-edge Technicolor process, which represented the pinnacle of cinematic color technology at the time. To take full advantage of this revolutionary visual medium, screenwriter Noel Langley made a bold and historic decision. The silver shoes would become sparkling ruby red. This change was far more than a simple visual adjustment. It triggered an aesthetic revolution. Under the bright lights of the film set, the red sequins on the slippers shimmered like tiny flames, creating a stunning contrast with the golden road and Dorothy's blue dress. What began as a technical decision ultimately produced one of the most valuable and recognizable props in cinematic history. The ruby slippers became an eternal symbol of magic, hope, and the wonder of Oz for generations of viewers. 6. Margaret Hamilton, a terrifying accident behind the smoke. Behind the magical scenes on screen, actress Margaret Hamilton endured a horrific accident that nearly cost her life. During the scene in which the Wicked Witch of the West disappears in a burst of smoke and fire, a deadly technical malfunction occurred. The trapdoor beneath her feet was supposed to open so she could safely descend below the stage. But it jammed, while the pyrotechnic effects were triggered too early. Flames erupted violently before Hamilton had time to retreat. The situation became even more dangerous because her distinctive green makeup contained copper-based ingredients, a substance that conducts heat and can be highly flammable. The explosion caused Hamilton to suffer second-degree burns on her face and severe third-degree burns on her hand, forcing her to spend months recovering in the hospital. Even more disturbingly, the so-called curse of the scene did not end there. The stunt double who later replaced her was also seriously injured when the witch's broomstick exploded during filming. These painful injuries stand as a sobering reminder of the immense price artists sometimes paid to create one of the most unforgettable villains in film history. 7. The Tin Man, a life-threatening price for a metallic appearance. Transforming into the Tin Man was not merely an acting challenge. It became a genuine fight for survival. Initially, the role was assigned to Buddy Ebsen. What he did not realize at the time was that he was stepping into a medical nightmare. To achieve the shiny metallic skin effect, makeup artists coated his body with pure aluminum powder. Within just a few days of filming, Ebsen inhaled an enormous amount of aluminum dust. The particles severely damaged his lungs, causing them to collapse to the point where he could barely breathe. The situation became so serious that Ebsen had to be rushed to the hospital in critical condition. He was ultimately forced to leave the production of The Wizard of Oz. The role was then reassigned to Jack Haley. Learning from the earlier disaster, the studio replaced the loose aluminum powder with a paste form to reduce airborne particles. But the toxic makeup still proved dangerous. Throughout the filming process, Haley suffered from painful eye infections caused by the chemicals used in the silver coating. The dazzling metallic shine seen on screen was, in reality, made of corrosive substances, turning every hour of filming for the Tin Man into an exhausting ordeal. 8. The Cowardly Lion. Torture inside a real fur costume. While audiences laughed at the lovable Cowardly Lion, the actor portraying him, Burt Lahr, endured a genuine physical ordeal. To achieve maximum realism, the production team created a costume weighing nearly 40 kilograms, assembled entirely from real lion skin and fur. Now imagine wearing that under the intense heat of massive Technicolor studio lights, which could push the temperature on set close to 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside that suffocating environment, the heavy fur suit essentially became a portable sauna. Lahr perspired so heavily that the costume would become soaked, heavier, and foul-smelling by the end of each day. Crew members had to run industrial blowers all night long just to dry the suit so he could wear it again the next morning. Even worse, the airtight heaviness of the costume often left Lahr exhausted and struggling to breathe. At times, to prevent him from collapsing on set, crew members had to insert cooling air tubes directly inside the costume to provide oxygen and emergency ventilation. Every step the King of Beasts took along the yellow brick road was, in truth, an extraordinary act of endurance against the brutal reality of the costume. 9. The Scarecrow. Permanent scars behind the smile. To portray the warm-hearted but brainless Scarecrow, Ray Bolger had to sacrifice something far more personal, his own skin. To create the wrinkled texture resembling burlap sacks, makeup artists designed a special rubber prosthetic mask and glued it tightly onto his face using an extremely powerful adhesive. Under the relentless heat of the studio lights, the glue did not loosen as intended. Instead, it softened, seeped into the pores of Bolger's skin, and effectively fused the prosthetic to his face. Removing the makeup after each grueling 12-hour filming day became a nightmare. Crew members had to pull the prosthetic away with force, an agonizing process that felt almost like peeling living skin from the actor's face. This painful routine continued for months. By the time production finally wrapped, the deep grooves and wrinkles around Ray Bolger's mouth and chin had become permanent scars. They never fully disappeared, remaining as painful reminders of the price he paid for a performance that would become immortal on the silver screen. 10. The Toxic Snowstorm. Deadly Beauty Made of Asbestos. The scene in which Dorothy and her companions fall asleep in the vibrant poppy field, as delicate white snow drifts gently from the sky, is often remembered as one of the most poetic moments in cinematic history. Yet behind this image of purity lies a terrifying truth. The snow used in the scene was actually pure asbestos, a highly toxic mineral now known to be one of the leading causes of lung cancer. In the 1930s, because modern synthetic materials had not yet been widely developed, Hollywood frequently used asbestos for special effects. It was inexpensive, easy to manipulate, and created a beautifully realistic snowfall effect under the dazzling lights of Technicolor. The principal actors, including Judy Garland, lay directly beneath this so-called snowfall for hours, breathing in microscopic asbestos fibers that drifted deep into their lungs. None of them wore any form of protective equipment. At the time, the film industry had little understanding of occupational safety. As a result, what appeared on screen as a magical moment of rescue in The Wizard of Oz was, in reality, a silent exposure to a dangerous toxin for the cast and crew alike. 11. The Flying Monkeys, a Dance on Deadly Wires. The terrifying spectacle of the flying monkeys, servants of the Wicked Witch of the West, brought fear to audiences, but for the stunt performers who portrayed them, it became a genuine nightmare. To create the illusion of flight, the production crew suspended actors high above the set using extremely thin piano wires. These wires were chosen because they were slender enough to remain nearly invisible to the cameras of the era. However, there was a serious problem. Although the wires were visually discreet, they were not strong enough to safely support the combined weight of the performers and their bulky costumes for long periods of time. As a result, several serious accidents reportedly occurred on set. In some cases, the thin wires suddenly snapped, sending stunt performers plunging from significant heights onto the hard wooden floors below. These falls led to numerous injuries, ranging from broken bones to severe spinal trauma. Even more troubling was the studio's response. Determined to protect the production schedule and the reputation of their multi-million-dollar project, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer reportedly kept these incidents as quiet as possible. In the process, the actors who portrayed the flying monkeys became largely forgotten victims of Hollywood's relentless pursuit of spectacle. 12. A chaotic relay race. One masterpiece for directors. Few viewers realized that the magical journey to Oz was shaped by 4 different directors, each leaving a unique mark on the film. At first, Richard Thorpe was placed in charge of the project. However, he was dismissed after only 2 weeks because the studio believed his creative vision did not align with the tone they wanted. He was briefly replaced by George Cukor, who introduced a crucial visual change. Cukor was the one who removed Dorothy's original heavy theatrical makeup and replaced it with a more natural, youthful appearance, an adjustment that helped make the character feel far more authentic. The most substantial portion of the film was then directed by Victor Fleming, who brought many of the iconic scenes in the Land of Oz to life. But before the film was completed, he was urgently reassigned by the studio to work on another massive production, Gone with the Wind. Finally, King Vidor stepped in to finish the project. He directed the scenes set in Kansas, which were filmed in the distinctive sepia tone that contrasted with the vibrant colors of Oz. At first glance, such constant changes behind the camera might have doomed the film to chaos. Yet somehow, the blending of these different creative visions resulted in a movie that feels remarkably cohesive, an unexpected harmony that helped transform The Wizard of Oz into one of the most enduring and beloved masterpieces in film history. 13. Victor Fleming, The Unmatched Record of 1939. The year 1939 has gone down in film history as a golden year for Hollywood, and at the center of that brilliance stood Victor Fleming. Fleming achieved a record that, to this day, remains virtually unmatched. He directed 2 of the most iconic films ever made at the same time, The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. The idea that a single filmmaker could help shape both a dazzling fantasy world filled with color and music, and at the same time oversee a sweeping, tragic historical epic about war and love, seems almost unimaginable. The pressure was immense. Fleming was eventually forced to leave the set of The Wizard of Oz while production was still underway, so he could rush to rescue Gone with the Wind, which had fallen into serious production turmoil. This historic double achievement not only earned him the Academy Award for Best Director, but also elevated Victor Fleming's name to legendary status. Even today, no director before or since has experienced a single year as extraordinary, one in which their work helped redefine the landscape of world cinema the way Fleming did in that remarkable year of 1939. 14. Victor Fleming's Slap, When Fear Became Art. Behind the joyful songs and the themes of friendship seen on screen, the set of The Wizard of Oz sometimes concealed harsh and troubling methods of direction. During the filming of a scene involving the Cowardly Lion, the young actress Judy Garland found herself unable to stop laughing at the comedic performance of her co-star Burt Lahr. After several failed takes, director Victor Fleming reportedly lost his patience. According to accounts often repeated in Hollywood history, Fleming pulled Judy aside and struck her across the face while angrily demanding that she regain control and focus on the scene. The sudden slap from such a powerful authority figure left the teenage Garland stunned and deeply frightened. When she returned to the camera, the trembling expression on her face and the tears in her eyes were no longer acting. They were the genuine emotional response of a frightened young performer. Ironically, that raw and vulnerable reaction produced a moment of remarkable emotional authenticity on screen. Yet it also left behind a painful psychological scar for the young star, revealing the darker realities that sometimes existed behind Hollywood's golden curtain. 15. The Technicolor Nightmare, when the set became a prison. Behind the dazzling colors and cheerful songs of The Wizard of Oz lay 6 grueling months of production that pushed the cast and crew to their limits. The daily schedule was brutal. Actors often began their day at 4 a.m. for makeup and preparation, and filming would continue until late at night, 6 days a week under the scorching heat of powerful studio lights. For many of the performers, life during production felt less like working on a magical film and more like enduring a Technicolor nightmare. They faced not only extreme physical exhaustion, but also strict diets imposed to maintain specific body appearances. On top of that, they spent long hours wearing heavy layers of chemical-laden makeup that clung to their skin throughout the day. The relentless pressure from studio executives turned each filming day into a genuine struggle for endurance. In many ways, every vibrant frame of the film that audiences admire today was paid for with the sweat, tears, and emotional strain of the artists who created it. For those who lived through the experience, the magical land of Oz sometimes felt less like a dream and more like a glittering prison hidden behind the brilliance of Technicolor. 16. Toto the Dog and the Paradox of Human Value. One of the most controversial truths behind the scenes of The Wizard of Oz lies in the astonishing disparity in pay among those involved in the production. While more than 100 actors portraying the residents of Munchkinland worked long hours under heavy, uncomfortable costumes and makeup for a modest wage of $50 per week, the small dog Terry, who played Toto, earned $125 per week, more than 2.5 times the salary of his human co-stars. This preferential treatment stemmed partly from the fact that Terry was a professionally trained animal performer with an established reputation. Yet the situation also reflected a harsher reality within Hollywood during the 1930s, the industry's frequent lack of respect and exploitation of performers whose appearances fell outside conventional norms. The actors portraying the Munchkins were not only paid less, but were often responsible for covering their own living expenses while working on the production, meaning their actual earnings were even lower. Toto's $125 weekly paycheck eventually became a painful symbol of inequality, suggesting that, in the eyes of some studio executives of the era, the value of a trained animal could be considered greater than the basic rights and compensation of human performers. 17. Earlier adaptations. The Misguided Steps Before Greatness. Before becoming an immortal cinematic landmark under the production of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, the story of Oz had already experienced a turbulent history on screen. Early film adaptations appeared in 1910 and 1925, but neither succeeded in capturing the true spirit and magical imagination that L. Frank Baum had poured into the original novel. The 1925 version, in particular, took dramatic liberties with the story, transforming it into a rather clumsy comedy that left many audiences feeling disconnected from the enchanting world they loved in the book. It was not until 1939 that the true cinematic miracle occurred. MGM approached the story with a bold ambition to create something revolutionary. The result was a film that seamlessly blended unforgettable music, groundbreaking visual effects, and deeply emotional storytelling. This remarkable fusion transformed a simple fairy tale into a multisensory cinematic experience, redefining what a fantasy film could be and permanently establishing the Land of Oz as a vivid and enduring part of the cultural imagination across generations. 18. Television, the door that turned Oz into a legend. Few people realize that one of the greatest films ever made once faced the possibility of fading quietly into obscurity. When The Wizard of Oz first premiered in 1939, its box office performance was disappointing compared with the enormous costs of its production. For a time, it seemed possible that the film might be remembered as little more than an ambitious but financially troubled project. Everything changed in 1956, when the television network CBS decided to broadcast the movie on television for the very first time. This decision proved historic. Dorothy's journey was suddenly no longer confined to movie theaters. It entered the living rooms of millions of families across the country. As the film began to air regularly each year, it gradually evolved into a cherished family tradition. Grandparents, parents, and children would gather together around the television to experience the adventure again and again. This intimate accessibility allowed the film to weave itself deeply into the childhood memories of countless viewers. What had once been a financially uncertain project slowly transformed into a timeless monument of popular culture. Without the unexpected magic of television, MGM's glittering jewel might have remained forgotten in studio archives instead of becoming a beloved piece of global cultural heritage. 19. Over the Rainbow, the masterpiece that nearly faced elimination by studio executives. It is difficult to imagine what The Wizard of Oz would be without the hauntingly beautiful melody of Over the Rainbow. Yet remarkably, this iconic song once stood on the verge of being completely removed from the film. Powerful executives at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer strongly opposed its inclusion. Their reasoning was blunt. The song was too melancholic, slowed the pace of the movie, and, perhaps most critically, did not fit the image of a young star singing alone in a farmyard setting. In fact, they reportedly requested 3 separate times that the scene be cut from the final edit in order to maintain what they believed should be the film's purely entertaining tone. Fortunately, the song survived thanks to the determined intervention of producer Arthur Freed, who fought to preserve the sequence until the very last moment. That historic decision proved transformative. The song went on to win the Academy Award for Best Original Song and eventually became one of the most beloved and enduring musical compositions of the 20th century. From a scene that nearly ended up on the cutting room floor, Over the Rainbow ultimately became the emotional soul of the film, a timeless expression of longing, hope, and dreams shared by millions of people around the world. Its story stands as a powerful reminder that sometimes the quietest, most reflective moments can become the most magical and unforgettable. 20. The Ruby Slippers and the Mysterious Heist of the Century. What began as a simple film prop made of silk and sequins eventually transformed into one of the most coveted artifacts in cinema history. The famous ruby slippers have become the holy grail for collectors of film memorabilia, with an estimated value reaching millions of dollars. It was precisely this extraordinary allure that led to a shocking crime in 2005. A pair of the slippers was stolen from the Judy Garland Museum in the state of Minnesota in a matter of minutes. For 13 long years, the priceless artifact completely vanished without a trace. Its disappearance fueled countless theories. Some speculated that it had been thrown into a deep lake to destroy evidence, while others believed it had quietly entered the secret private collection of an unknown billionaire. Finally, in 2018, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, recovered the legendary slippers after a dramatic undercover operation. Yet even after their recovery, many aspects of the case remain shrouded in mystery. The true mastermind behind the theft and the methods used to hide the slippers for more than a decade are still subjects of speculation. The incident not only confirmed the immense financial value of the ruby slippers, but also reinforced their mythic cultural status. an object so iconic that even the real world seems unable to resist the temptation to possess it. Conclusion: a miracle carved from scars. As we close the vibrant and magical journey of the Wizard of Oz, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The dazzling beauty of the Land of Oz was not created by visual effects and music alone. It was also forged through sweat, tears, and the often brutal realities of early Hollywood. Behind Dorothy's bright smile lay moments of fear sparked by harsh discipline. Beneath the costumes of the Tin Man and the Scarecrow were actors enduring intense physical discomfort and pain. Perhaps it is precisely this cruel contradiction, the idea that breathtaking beauty can be sculpted from profound hardship, that has given the film its extraordinary, timeless vitality. When Dorothy Gale gently clicks the heels of her ruby slippers and whispers the immortal line, "There's no place like home," it feels like far more than scripted dialogue. It sounds almost like a sigh of relief, a quiet echo of the long and difficult journey that the entire cast and crew endured to bring this cinematic miracle to life. The Land of Oz may be a dream woven from imagination, but the sacrifices made by the artists who created it remain profoundly real. Their story reminds us of a universal truth. Sometimes, to reach glory, one must walk the most difficult stretches of the yellow brick road.